During the Roman period, mail armor became popular for a reason. Mail is flexible, comfortable to wear, and can withstand virtually any blow from basically any weapon of that era. But apparently this still wasn't enough, because certain Roman mail armors added a second layer of mail on top of the shoulders. And this is not different armor, like for example plates with different properties. This is just a second layer of mail on top of an already existing layer of mail. Now that second layer of mail is usually called shoulder guards, shoulder doublings, shoulder pads, or something like that, and you see them a lot on Roman mail shirts, aka Lorica Gallica or Lorica Hamata, which is basically this exact kind of armor here. And you see a similar system on certain other armors like the Lorica Squamata, which is basically a scale armor. Now these shoulder guards were not unique to the Romans. Certain other people, like for example the Gauls, also had them. And even within the Roman armors, not every single Roman mail armor or scale armor had certain of these shoulder guards. You definitely had some Roman armors without them, only it was the norm to actually have them. Now these shoulder guards are only added to the armor, meaning that this is a completely normal mail shirt, only these shoulder guards have been added to it. So they're attached on the back with one single row of rings, and then they wrap across the shoulders and attach on the front right here. On the front are attached via this sort of hooking system, so you basically have a sort of button or something like that on the shoulder guard itself, and then you have these hooks that are attached in the middle right here to the mail shirt itself, and these hooks will come and hook into that button right here, so they secure the shoulder guards to the front of the armor. But other than these two attachments right here on the back and on the front, there is nothing attaching the shoulder guards to the armor, meaning that it is sitting completely loose over the rest of the mail shirt. Now, to understand why these even are here in the first place, we first need to figure out what problems they solve. And the first thing they do is obviously to add protection to the shoulders. Obviously they're adding extra protection to the shoulders, and not only to the shoulders but also the upper back, collarbone, also to the front, the chest, even the heart and so on. You have double layer of mail over a lot of important parts of your body because of these shoulder guards. And obviously this is very useful because, well, first of all, the shoulders are on themselves in any case quite a major part of the body to hit. They are relatively easy to hit compared to other parts of the body, but even more so when you consider the fighting styles of the Romans. As you probably know, they had a big, large rectangular shield called the scutum. That would, well, protect them a lot because it is such a large shield, meaning that hitting something like the body, the upper legs or something like that was virtually impossible with the vast majority of weapons. But the problem with that big shield was that it was obviously big and heavy, so lifting it up high was hard, meaning that quite a primary target for all the opponents of the Romans would be the shoulders, because they could come above the shield and hit in the shoulders. Obviously not only the shoulders, also the head, but obviously the helmet protects the head, and we are talking about the body armor right now, so I'm not going to focus on the helmet. And obviously this just means that the shoulder guards would add additional protection to the part of the body that was most likely to get hit, meaning the shoulders. Now, as I said, these shoulder guards also existed on the scale armor, and for the scale armor they are very, very useful because they cover up all the different attachment between the different pieces of armor that would else be uncovered, because obviously you will basically have a sort of front plate and a sort of back plate on a scale armor that will connect on the shoulder, and obviously that is going to be a weak point where you can slip a blade in between the two pieces where the scales are not entirely covering or something like that. So by adding these shoulder guards, you are basically reinforcing and adding protection over that section that might be an easy target otherwise. Now this obviously is particularly for the scale armor, because obviously mail is just, well, it's basically just a mesh. You don't have any transition between different pieces of the armor, so it has no forms of gaps whatsoever, so it doesn't really need that. But even for the mail armor, it does still serve the advantage to cover up slightly more the neck area. A problem you can have with mail armor is that the hole for the neck is quite large, because obviously you need to fit your head through and so on, and it is metal, so it isn't as flexible as something like normal clothing or something like that. So you need quite a large hole to fit your head through, and that means that obviously you are going to have a big hole around your neck, meaning that theoretically you can have a blade going into that hole and hitting your neck, or thrusting into the rest of your body via the neck hole. And one thing that these shoulder guards do is to come and cover up that neck hole at least slightly. If I remove the shoulder guard right here, you can see there's a quite large area here where I'm not protected at all, and where theoretically anyone could just slip a blade right through and potentially kill me, because it is quite a dangerous spot to get hit. And obviously, when you consider the fact that most blows would come from above because of the shield design, well, that can be a big problem to get hit in that one area. And what the shoulder guard does is to come around and come in closer to the neck and cover up that gap. As you can see, now this has covered up most of that gap, so I am much more protected. And obviously it can do that because it's just coming from the back. I don't have to get my head through. It is coming over and protecting on my neck. I don't have to get my head through that hole. And on top of that, it also has these leather edgings right here that will prevent the rings from rubbing into my neck, because obviously that is another problem, generally speaking, with mail armor, that the rings, the uncovered rings, will just rub across your neck, and that might be impractical if the hole is not large enough. Therefore, by having that leather edging, you can actually get it quite close to the neck without it being too much of a problem. Then you also have the fact that these shoulder guards will absorb a certain amount of impact, because obviously, even though a blow, let's say from a sword for example, doesn't pierce the armor, it will still deliver a lot of blunt force through the armor because it is so flexible, meaning that you can at least get hurt, but even you can break a bone or something like that, even though the armor did not get pierced. And if you add another layer of mail, you are distributing that impact better than with a singular layer of mail. Now obviously, it still is only another layer of mail. It still isn't going to be as good at distributing impact as something like a plate armor or something like that, or as proper padding, but it still helps to a certain degree, especially when we consider the fact that the amount of padding that was worn underneath armor during that era was rather limited. We don't know exactly if there even was any form of real padding worn underneath the armor, and if there was, it wasn't as thick as some later forms of padding, so distributing that impact a little bit better is always useful. And finally, the last advantage is that the shoulders are a relatively high stress zone, which means that obviously, as I said, most of the blows that are going to hit you are going to hit you in the shoulders. And even though they might not pierce the armor itself, they might still break a couple links or something like that. And also, all the weight of the armor itself, or at least all the weight above your belt, is going to hang on your shoulders. Then you also have all the equipment you wear. A lot of the weight of all the equipment you wear are going to go on the shoulders, like for example the strap for your sword, like for example your backpack, and the Romans did have very, very heavy backpacks that they wore for a very, very long time. So all of that weight is going to go on the shoulders. Therefore, these shoulder guards would act as a sort of padding to distribute the force of all of that weight, but also they would add a lot of durability to the shoulders. Because obviously all of this weight, all of this equipment rubbing towards it, and all of the hits are going to make you lose a couple links or something like that, and are going to damage your armor. And the good thing is that these shoulder guards are not a structural part of the armor itself. As I said, these are only added on top of the armor. They are not a structural part. Meaning that these shoulder guards can be completely broken, just completely ruined, but it will not break the structural integrity of the armor itself. And the problem is that the maintenance of these Romans' armor were probably not the best. As you may know, the Roman soldiers themselves did not own the armors. They were just given the armor when they were recruited. Meaning that most probably you would not get a new armor, but rather an older armor that had already been used, that had already been damaged slightly, and that wasn't necessarily repaired very, very well. And also, you as a soldier on your own probably don't have the money to repair this mail shirt that isn't even yours, it is owned by your superiors. And the problem is that if you did not have these shoulder guards, all the broken rings, all the damage, all the wear and tear would be on the armor itself, which could potentially break the structural integrity of the armor itself. If you have all of that on the shoulder guards, which aren't a part of the structural integrity of the armor, that isn't too much of a problem. You can have completely damaged shoulder guards, you're going to be fine. So definitely a part of the reason why these shoulder guards were here were to add extra protection, to cover the gaps and so on. but it was also to add more durability to the armor because you're essentially adding a protection for the armor itself. And obviously this is only done on the shoulders themselves, because obviously you could do it on the entire armor, you could double up the entire armor, but that wouldn't be practical, it would be way too heavy to wear, and it just would make for a much worse armor. When you're only having that extra weight on the shoulders, you are basically using the weight in an efficient manner. Now obviously at this point the shoulder guards seem like a genius idea, yet they were later abandoned. The later Roman Empire abandoned these shoulder guards, and obviously later mail shirts, like for example the ones that were used in the Migration era, in the Viking Age, and in the later Middle Ages, did not have any of these shoulder guards. What we usually see instead is the armors getting sleeves. Obviously this one might look like it has sleeves to a certain degree, but it doesn't actually have sleeves. It does not have any form of added sleeve. This is just the armor itself just extending all the way up there, and then there is just a hole in the side of the armor that I'm putting my arm through, not an added sleeve. It's a little bit like if you took this mail shot right here and just cut it right here, it would still extend a little bit out on the arm, but there wouldn't be any added sleeve. So yes, to a certain degree it does protect the arm a little bit, but it's not an added sleeve. Later mail shirts would usually abandon these shoulder guards right here and instead have sleeves. And this is not because the sleeves were just a better overall solution, it is because the Roman fighting style changed. Because as I said, the Romans would use the scutum, which is a large rectangular shield that would protect their entire body very, very well, leaving the head and shoulders as the primary targets for their opponents. However, in the later empire, this changes, and they are more often going to use an oval shield instead of the rectangular shield. Now, this is probably done because of the adoption of the Sparta, because the Sparta is more of a cutting sword than the gladius, meaning that, well, obviously a rectangular shield is not very practical to use with a cutting sword, because the corners of the shield will conflict with your cutting motion. Because when you're trying to cut with the Sparta, the corner of the shield will be impractical. Therefore, they replaced it with an oval shield, which just basically removed these corners and made it more practical to use with a cutting sword. This is probably what happened, but in any case, when you are using an oval shield like this one, I have a little bit less protection on the side of my arms because of the shape of the shield. If this was a rectangular shield, I could have protection all the way out on the side here, and the side of my arms would be perfectly fine. However, with this oval shield, the side of my arms right here are a bit more vulnerable. And this is also the case for the legs. Obviously, when you remove the corners that would otherwise protect your legs, now you only have this oval shape, you have a little bit less protection, meaning that the legs are slightly easier to hit. And all of this means that when you are using an oval shield, the shoulders are suddenly not that much of a primary target. Obviously, they still are a target. You can still perfectly well target the shoulders, but they are not the primary target to hit. You also have the other targets, like for example the arms, like for example the legs. So the shoulders are just not that much of a primary target, and therefore adding reinforcements to them are not that necessary anymore. And instead you can use that weight of the shoulder guards to add more protection to unprotected areas of the body, like for example the arms, by adding sleeves. And if you go to something like the later Middle Ages, you have more padding, so the load spreading effect of these shoulder guards are not that necessary anymore. And on top of that, mail was usually part of a layering system, meaning that it was worn under some form of other armor, usually, like for example a coat of plate, a brigandine, plate armor, or something like that. And obviously, if you have these shoulder guards, it is going to be slightly impractical to have these shoulder guards under another form of armor, even though it does work. I have tried it with La Mala armor, and it does work perfectly well. It just is slightly impractical, you just get slightly more bulky, but it does work. But it is also slightly unnecessary, like you don't need 2 layers of mail plus your extra layer of whatever other armor you're wearing. So in the end, these shoulder guards were incredibly useful when they were used, meaning during the Roman Republic and early Empire, because they were spreading the load, adding durability to the armor, and also adding protection to the part of the body that is most likely to get hit. But later on, that part of the body wasn't so necessary to protect that much. it was more worth it to add more protection to other parts of the body, and they never appeared late in the Middle Ages because mail had become part of a layering system, meaning that these shoulder guards would be unnecessary and slightly impractical. Anyways, hope you enjoyed the video. If you have any more suggestions for what purpose these shoulder guards could have, please tell me in the comments, because obviously there might be other reasons that I haven't come across or that I haven't thought about. So please tell me in the comments, and hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll see you on the next one.